This is a meeting of the Nashua Curriculum and Evaluation Committee. We're in the school administration building. It's a little bit after 5:30. It's 5:33. And we'll go ahead and start with a roll call, please.
Dr. Muratanti?
Here.
Mr. Kaufman?
Here.
Ms. Van Twyver's here. Mrs. O'Hensey?
Here.
She's on the phone, so we'll have mandatory roll calls if we have any. Dr. Mosley is here. Mrs. Fitzpatrick, is she
Yes,
here?
I am.
Oh, you came in back door. Okay. Dr. McKinney is here. Mr. Donovan is not here. And Kim Kleiner from the mayor's office is here. We have a quorum.
We have 2 other board members, 3 other board members. How do you get any respect here?
Well, Mr. Fahrenkopf and Mr. Hallowell.
Just twice at the beginning of the meeting.
I don't know. Hey, we're gonna get some new people on the board with different names. I don't know.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Mr. Hollowell and Mrs. Oden are also here.
Sorry, Odin, Hallowell. Zeem, is she here?
No,
Is Mr. Mosher here?
no, I did not see him either.
Sorry about that, folks.
So we're short of the full board.
Yeah, short of the full board, but we quorum for the meeting.
Oh, definitely. We even have our alternate calling from Europe. So thank you for joining us, Mrs. Hohensee. Okay, so
No problem.
we have 3 items on our agenda, but we'll go out of order. And we'll start first with a talk on the Mayor's Challenge. And so, Ms. Kleiner, would you take it away, please, and tell us what the Mayor's challenging us on?
Sure. So first, let me apologize. The mayor is traveling, or he would have been here himself this evening. So earlier this summer, the mayor was attending a mayor's conference. And one of the items that was brought up there was Bloomberg's Mayor's Challenge. And this is a challenge for cities that have a population over a certain size. Cities can apply. The idea is they have to have an innovative idea that hasn't been done before. And it's a very competitive application process. The mayor decided to submit an application, and after working with many different people across the city, different organizations, the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, of course the school district, the Youth Council, the National Prevention Coalition. We've had quite a group around a table for about 8 weeks now, including a facilitator coming from Bloomberg to help us walk through some ideas. The mayor's decided to submit an application, and the application is due this Friday. So we wanted to come here and discuss a little bit, and of course until the application is filed, how much information we have to put forth is limited. We're still working on a lot of the details, and especially budget information and things of that sort. But come Friday, we expect to submit a completed application. The reason we wanted to bring it forth to you folks is our pilot program is centered around an idea of creating resiliency with our youth and using a form of positive psychology to do that. And the pilot will be in the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA. Now, it's a very competitive grant. So 555 cities are slotted to apply. 35 of those cities will get the initial $100,000 grant, which is for your pilot program. So when I say competitive, that's what we're dealing with. But we're hopeful that we have a very good idea, that it's innovative, and that Bloomberg will look favorably upon it. After that, next August of 2018, if we are one of the 35 chosen, you can then take your idea forward and go meet with other cities that are part of the 35 and work on a larger plan to submit an application for $1 million. Those cities that are chosen are very slim. Now you're down to one from the United States, one from the United Kingdom, one from South America. So obviously it's even more competitive at that. One of the ideas that has been brought forward for the $1 million program
Like it's like awesome.
is if we see success at the Boys and Girls Club and at the Y, how would we possibly take that to a larger number of students somehow through the school district? So you have to see some positive growth in your pilot program, obviously, to be considered for the $1 million. At that point, so next August, if it looks like we have won the $100,000, we're one of the 35, and we're going to submit a $1 million application, we would have discussions with the board at that point and the administration on what they would see going forward.
But we felt that it was important to have transparency in that these applications are posted online and they're public access for anyone to read. And we didn't want anybody caught unaware that we were moving with this idea, knowing that we're in a very competitive process. The other piece that I think is interesting is that the curriculum that they're going to be piloting at the Boys Girls Club and the YMCA was developed with a professor at Revere University. So it is a standardized curriculum that has very specific lessons to it. And I believe the administrators had a presentation last week about some of the programs that can be offered from the Y. So that was one of the things that they're working toward.
Very good. So are there members of the board, especially this committee, that have questions for Ms. Kleiner? And
Good
before
luck.
yes. By the way, I will wish you well. I have a doctorate in technological innovation, so I'm very familiar with innovation and what it really means. So invention is the very first time anyone, anywhere, has come up with this idea. Innovation is the first time you have applied an idea, which maybe it's not an invention with you, maybe somebody else invented it, but it's the first time you have applied it to that particular instance. The tough part is coming up with an innovation that somebody else has not already tried, because that's I think, based on what you've told us, the fact that nobody else has ever done it before, or possibly even proposed it at the same time for this competition, is going to be important. So I hope you've been very hush-hush about exactly what it is you're planning, so that others don't steal your idea and propose it too. So anyway, are there questions, comments? Because this sounds like a really interesting contest.
So when do you have to submit it by Friday?
By Friday the 20th.
So you can just send us a link once you put it up there? Is that- yeah.
Yes, and so it's one of the ideas with the challenge is that you have all these cities coming up with all these innovative ideas, but they also have to be able to be transferable. So, could another community, another city use your idea later to better themselves? And so it's really a process, because now we've started to look at what some other cities have done past years. This isn't the first year that Bloomberg has done this. Providence won 2 years ago,
I think it was 2.
on educating their preschoolers and their young kids before they got to kindergarten, teaching them more words, and they did it as a community. And it's really fascinating to read some of these other cities and what they've done, because if we can all learn from each other, it saves us all a lot of work.
By the way, the other thing is that I think our state and our city has a good shot. Our state runs a couple of statewide innovation contests every year. And there's one going on right now, being run by the NHIRC for social innovations. So maybe you can take all of this good work and take a look at the NHIRC Social Innovation Challenge and see if you can submit some of these good ideas and give yourselves a second shot at winning. Okay, well, any other questions or comments? If not, thank you very much for coming, and I think all of us wish you well.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Wish us well. Okay, so it looks like the next agenda item is going to be an update on the full-day kindergarten program. So, Dr. McKinney?
Thank you, Dr. Maritaki. This is just a quick update on full-day kindergarten. Just talking about three things: curriculum, instruction, assessment, and our goals for this year. So our curriculum, the written curriculum, is focused in these areas: ELA, which includes those 5 parts from reading, writing, word study, mathematics, focus on numbers, shape, measurement, number pairs, includes games and some hands-on learning for kids, and number bonds. The other parts of the curriculum, aside from these main 2 areas, also include science, the 3 domains in science, 3 areas in social studies. Our kindergarten students go to unified arts, art, music, PE, computers, and library, and we have a guidance program that focuses on some of the areas you can see there on the slide. This also doesn't include the little things that kindergarten teachers do a great job teaching students how to become acquainted with the school, learning to take turns, walk in the lines, sit on a carpet square, all those things that are important in being a school setting. Our teachers utilize these instructional techniques, which are built on creating a warm classroom environment, a sense of community, strong relationships between the students, and routines and expectations. It's really run the classroom so that learning can take place continuously. We have a balance between small and large group instruction, hands-on learning, individual attention. There are movement breaks throughout the day, from snacks to lunch to, I've seen song and dance. Not sitting at a desk for 6 to 8 hours a day, but the kids move throughout the classroom. And they're focused on utilizing frameworks for that, so we use the Readiness Workshop or Daily 5. In K and 1, we have some screening tools that we use that build upon phonological awareness, letter ID, letter sound relationships, spelling, and high-frequency words. In a similar model, we use our Eureka Mathematics curriculum, which is focusing on whole numbers, sets of objects, and describing shapes and space. Some of the assessment tools that we use in kindergarten, again, there are lots of formative assessments. Those are checks for understanding and help drive instruction. We use a standards-based grading at the elementary level and collect evidence of learning to see where kids are relative to grade end-of-year standards. So are they meeting the standard, progressing, beginning, or not yet ready meeting that standard. There's lots of conferencing, one-on-one, direct instruction. And with not using iReady, we use the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessment system, which is a reading assessment, authentic reading assessment used in a reading conference. Running records happen all the time to move kids to a year's growth at the end of the year in kindergarten. We have benchmarks included in the standards-based report card for high-frequency words, and that, again, connects to our standards-based grading. And along that lines, in mathematics, we have our end-of-unit and mid-module assessments, exit slips, formative assessments, and we're using some concrete examples of Cuisenaire rods, which are hands-on learning. They're color-coded rods that go from 1 to 10, so kids can begin to build a solid understanding of the numbers that go up, taking away, moving up and down, recognizing more or less than, etc. So our goals for this year for kindergarten, we're monitoring implementation. I've been checking in with the principals and the classroom teachers. We're going to try to expand collaboration, not just with kindergarten, although I've met with their kindergarten cohort. We want to get some input from pre-K, our preschool programs, and then also our first grade, and see what readiness looks like a year from now or from our kindergarten programs. I'm taking a look at all the school and teacher schedules and looking for equity and best practices. There is a need to review paraprofessional support. There are schools that have a higher number of paras in kindergarten than others. We're going to research best practices. We're fortunate, along with that in PD, there's a full-day kindergarten conference that's happening here in Nashua in December, and we're sending a team of teachers to that and a principal to bring back information to the district. And like I said, we're going to partner with our preschool programs. And then towards the end of the year, we're looking to solicit feedback both from the teachers, our principals, and our parents on how the overall full day is going and what kind of issues are out there that we can address for next year. So,
Okay, thank you very much. Is a copy of this presentation going to be made available to us?
Sure.
I didn't see a PDF so far. Okay.
It needs to go with the minutes of the meeting too, so Jackie needs to get it.
yep, we can do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so are there any questions from committee members or board members? Yes, Mr. Howell.
So I have a simple one. I've never heard the term exit slips. What does that mean?
An exit slip is something at the end of a lesson to see how well students grasp that concept. And it's something that's quick, it's easy, teachers collect it, and you can sort them to see the level of retention or learning, and then you use that to drive your instruction. So it's a formative assessment, it's assessment for learning.
And then the other question I had, do we do outreach to parents in terms of what they ought to be doing before a student either gets to kindergarten or gets to first grade? I always think that communication to the prospective parent is it's always a challenge, but do you know if we have any formal way of doing that? Like, I know when we send out letters, this is your teacher, but do we include in that, these are the things we're looking for in what students do, or tips for what parents might do to better prepare their kids for kindergarten or first grade?
Yes and no. I don't know if it's a consistent practice all the way through. I think that's why checking with preschool is a good idea. Some schools at their kindergarten orientation give parents that for the upcoming year. But I agree with you, is there a way we can make that systemized across the district? But I'm also happy to look to the pros in the back of the room to see
We have some
here.
principals here that might be able to get some commentary.
That happens across the district as well.
Go ahead, please.
Sure, Pat's now.
Can you come sit up here just so we can?
Please, please. Thank you. So appreciate it.
Good evening, everyone. At our kindergarten orientation, parents are handed, explained a packet of different activities they can do with the students. There's usually a book, there's crayons, there's magnetic letters, so they can work with their students on letter ID, letters, numbers, information, and any other tricks that we can help the parents to help them get their students ready for kindergarten.
Can you just identify yourself for Jackie?
Sure. Pat Snow, principal, Mount Pleasant Elementary School.
Thank you.
How long before kindergarten is the orientation?
The orientation takes place in the spring before the start of
Okay.
that coming school year.
Yes, Mr. Coffey.
Hi, Pat, good to see you again. So it's kind of like almost a boot camp for the parents on how to get your child ready for kindergarten.
It's an
Other than giving them that packet when they first come in,
I know-
is there any follow-up during the summer?
Yes, I know that different schools have offered get set and ready to learn type of programs for kindergarten, for pre-kindergarten students. So we have done that through Title I funds.
Okay, so the Title I schools, so what you're speaking to is a function of the Title I programs? Is
It's-
packets going out
We've
in
been
the spring?
able to do it because of the funding, yes.
Okay, so they do not
That's
occur in
correct.
the other schools?
No, because this is our first.
Oh, that's okay. No, so where I'm headed toward is, well, maybe we could figure out what would be the cost to ensure, you know, the board really wants what we call equity for the Title I schools, for all schools, you know, across the board, equal opportunity for everybody. So Title I gives us help, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to give that same assistance to everybody else. So maybe Dr. McKinney or the administration with the help of, you know, these folks. And by the way, the public should know, I bet we have about 20, 25 administrators and teachers, kindergarten teachers here today. You can't see them, but they're behind us. But we want to thank them for coming and understand we do have a commitment. We want it to be the best program that it can be. So maybe we can help understand what those costs are. So the next budgeting cycle, we might be able to, get that equity, especially the bootstrapping kind of thing, and give parents an extra hand and resource that they know they can get some help too. So that's that. Now, you won't know until next year how successful. Now, you said this was a best practice, giving these little packet things out in the
Working
spring.
closely with parents. Parents are the child's first teacher, and anything we can do to help the parents with that learning that takes before school, during, after school, is going to help the child succeed
Do
academically.
these programs include, I'll call it a workshop because I don't know what else to call it for the parents. On Tuesday afternoon, we're going to have an instruction thing of how to review things or how to walk your kids through the letters, or, I don't know.
Through the years, different types of opportunities have been available for parents. I remember when I was a teacher at Amherst Street, I actually did a camp for incoming kindergarten students, and part of the camp was to have the parents come in and learn a hands-on game for the student and the parent to bring home to play and enjoy and learn and read, and just that one-on-one time together.
Do we know of any, online nowadays, YouTube is the resource everybody wants to go to. So do we know of any educationally oriented materials on YouTube that would make it easy for parents to be able, we give them help to find it. Not, so anyway, I think we can, there's some hands out.
Mrs. Fulton, would you? No,
Just give it a
Yeah.
Are you going to talk about the blast off?
Yes.
I was actually, just for the record, I was actually going to share my observations on the blast off program that I actually observed at the Amherst Street School, and as well as Dr. Chris. But go ahead, I'll let you.
Hi, I'm Sherry Fulton. Right now, I'm the new principal of Dr. Crisp Elementary School, but I used to be the director of Title I. So with our Title I funds, in answer to your question, Mr. Kaufman, it's about $11,000 a summer for each of our Title I schools to be able to have what we call the Blast Off to Kindergarten program. And that is targeted really toward children who haven't been to preschool, have had or maybe not a great experience in preschool, and the parents just want them to have that continuous education through the summer. So it is a typically 4-week program, 5 days of the week, and our children really are focusing in on social skills, learning to sit and listen to that story, learning to hold a pencil and to color with crayons and to use scissors, just getting them prepared for coming to school and being really successful. So that's kind of something that we've done at Title I, and I know that we've approached the board before to say it's about $11,000 a building, if you wanted to do this across the district.
I guess I'll just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask if you'd talk a little bit. I was on the preschool committee last year with preschool teachers and first grade teachers developing what students need to know coming out of preschool going into kindergarten. If you could talk a little bit about that and what we wanted to do to make sure that what we were expecting got back to some of the private
Yes.
preschools.
Yes, so when the school district changed over and wrote their new report cards, we looked at the preschool and said, we want to do something so that parents understand what they need to know to come into kindergarten and to be prepared. So a committee of preschool teachers and kindergarten teachers came together many times last year and the year before. Actually, we're in our 3rd year of writing this, trying to form a progress report for parents to see what they need going forward. It's a 3-year-old, as a 4-year-old, and then where that leads you as a 5-year-old. So that's kind of the progression we're using so parents can understand. Part of the Title I preschool, and I know that that's only available to students who are going to a Title I elementary school, but parent education is one of our biggest concerns there, as well as educating the student. So we hold many classes about helping the parents learn what they can do at home to make their child successful. Also, one of the things we did last year with the Title I funding was to produce a video. And the video is of a actual Title I parent teaching their child how to play math games. Simple things like counting as they're putting away their toys, or going up and down the stairs and counting forwards and backwards. It was about a 15-minute video that went out on the channel, and it was very well received. Our hope was this year to continue that with a reading example of having a parent just sitting down, cuddling up, reading a book and asking those really important questions about the characters and the setting and the main idea of the story, just to kind of model what parents can do at home. So that was kind of one of our ways of outreaching that we thought could go to everyone, not just Title I parents.
I'd like to follow up on Ms. Soden's question. As a state rep, I've been invited along with fellow state reps out of Nashua to basically go ahead and visit some of the private pre-Ks, like the Y has got an excellent program, also some of the private kindergarten programs as well. One common thing I drew out of that experience was that there was almost like a lament. We wish we could get from the Nashua schools some idea of what they expect their kindergartners to walk in with or their first graders to walk in with, and we could align what we do at the Y or wherever much better so that that kid enters the public schools much better prepared for their first experience. So to me that sounded like there may be a stovepipe kind of effect going on. What are we doing at this district to break out of that stovepipe?
Well, I can tell you that when I started Title I 4 years ago, one of the first things we did was on a teacher workshop day, we asked, at that point in time, something called the Kindergarten Readiness Indicators, the KRIs, had come out from the state. And that was a pamphlet that had been written for anyone, parents, teachers, to see what a child needs before they're ready for kindergarten. So taking that opportunity, we got together as our district, and I sent out so many letters to private kindergartens and preschools in our city, and everyone came together on that day of our workshop day and met, and we began with a discussion of the KRIs, the indicators, and then we moved into focus groups. And in our focus groups, we tried to kind of connect people and talk about what was, what we were doing in the public school, what are you doing in the private school, and really just listening to each other, which was invaluable. I would love to do something like that again. It hasn't been repeated since then, but I think it was a great starter for a communication between private and public.
So that's like a workshop that was hosted by our district?
It was hosted by us, yes.
Okay. Sounds like a great idea that we should probably do, even annually. The other question along those lines is that in addition to the private pre-Ks and the private Ks, do we also invite homeschool parents to come to this? And is there a charge associated with attending?
There was no charge, no. In fact, the state provided the Kindergarten Readiness Indicators books. They're paperback, but they have like a spine. They made up, oh my goodness, I think they brought 50 or 60, but we ended up having over 75 people come to that workshop day. So then they took names and sent them out again. So it was a great networking. It was I think a lot of what I heard was, they felt valued because as a private organization or a daycare, they don't always feel that maybe what they're doing is as important as the public schools. And so this two-way conversation that we had was just amazing.
Outstanding. So, Mr. Farrington, you had a question?
Well, along those same lines, because I've wondered, and we've talked about this in other settings, about establishing better lines of communication with these folks so that they can understand what we expect. And along with what Dr. Murataki said, I'm curious to know what we've done and what other things we can do, sharing with them the information that you talked about, so that they know what is expected of these students coming in. I mean, if from a commercial standpoint, they can advertise that they're working with us and that they are on the same page as what we are as far as development of curriculum and all that sort of stuff. So I think there's benefits to be derived for the students in the end.
I agree. And when we first did this, I Googled and I emailed and I wrote letters. And now I found out that the state has resources that I could tap into to get their addresses and the names of the different directors and things. Also, the community center is opening soon, which is going to be in front of Dr. Chris, but it's open to the whole city. At the community center, we have talked long and hard about what we can do for early childhood. That's one of our goals. And the YMCA is going to be putting in a 2-day-a-week program for 3 and under, and just basically with a caregiver. So you can come and learn how to read a story or play a game or have a snack, and the language and the interaction you can do even when you're just having a snack together. So I think that the more we talk to our other cohorts in the city is just amazing, because the Y has so many programs that they can do and bring to our schools and bring out to the community, as well as many, many others. So I just think having that open conversation is really important.
There's some excellent programs in the private sector here.
Yes, excellent ones, yeah.
A follow-up from me, and then Mr. Kaufman and Mr. Hollowell.
And I don't mean to hog it. I don't, I can sit back.
Hold the door. If you're in the hot seat, hold the door.
A question about early learning. It's good you mentioned that, because Riviera has a very, very good early learning academy, and quite a few of our teachers are getting their master's degrees there. Do we have collaboration with Riviera?
We do. I know that.
That's just that grant that they just
Right.
talked about.
And in many of our schools, the Riviera teachers come over and do student teaching with us or doing their practicums with us, as well as some of the different kind of backdoor programs. Like the YMCA has a connection with Riviera College to help collect data on how students are doing in different settings. Say in Hudson, they have a program where they have a room set up within their middle school, and they have a certified teacher there, and that certified teacher brings in students who are maybe not attending school regularly or having some difficulties, and works with them for 6 weeks and does an amazing program. The data is collected through Riviera and then given back to the Hudson School District. So that's something that we were hoping that maybe we could get started in Nashua as well. But they wrote a grant and the grant didn't come through, so now Joe Manzoli's looking for other forms of funding for that, because it's a wonderful way to work with the university as well as our school district and our children.
Very good. Mr. Kaufman, you had a question?
Yes, thanks. I was curious, the successful program that you ran with the various private providers, what time of year do you run that? Or did you run it, and would you recommend the same time of year?
We did. I would recommend the same time. We did it on the, what's the workshop we do in January? President's Day workshop last year. The one, or a few years ago, February, thank you. And it's an all-day workshop where teachers have the ability to choose where they wanted to go at the time. So we just did a survey, and most people said, we would love to start talking to other private daycares and preschools and learn what they're doing, and vice versa. So it just was born from that.
Dr. Mosher?
Yes, follow.
Thank you. So are those dates committed already? I know you guys really look far ahead on what PD dates are. So.
Yes, yes, we're already committed to those dates.
Okay. And Mr. Hell?
I seem to recall that there was, maybe it was a committee for daycare providers in Nashua. Am I thinking of the thing just the one thing that you ran? I thought there was sort of a standing committee of,
There probably is.
I don't remember where.
I know the United Way, for quite some time, we had put together a committee that was working on some goals for early childhood in the city, and it was many different people were represented at the table, the library, many organizations, and I know you can speak to that as well. And it was, we came together and formed some common goals that we wanted to work on, and then with the United Way's guidance, we kind of went out and spread out some ideas with the community and early childhood education.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, it's in the back of my head that somebody mentioned that we had a representative that would sometimes go to those meetings of the private daycare providers. Might be another avenue to pursue.
Very good. Are there any, oh yes, Ms. Van Twyver.
Well, I'm going to ask the bad question. We've gone through 9 months of school, and now these students are going to go into first grade. And how does the principal get some kind of report on the success of some of these students, or does the assistant superintendent, from a Board of Education? I'd like to know how successful these kids were at doing the simple things that you've talked about already. So
Within the kindergarten?
yeah.
So we've had just 3 months of school so far, but you mean at the end?
At
when
the
we're
end.
all at done?
Yes, like last year, at the end of the
Okay.
year, does the principal get some kind of report? I had 5 students, 15 students, and 3 of them are top-notch, and 4 need some help, and 5 are just, not doing it.
So a couple things, let me just kind of jump in real quick, and then I'll turn it over to God. At the beginning, we mentioned some of the formative assessments that we use in terms of the assessments that we use for a student. I want to be very clear, growth. So student may start off using our formative assessment let's say, letters, and maybe they just know A and B, and maybe at the end of that 9-month period, they'll know all of their letters in terms of the alphabet. The other thing that I think, I would say that I call them habits of mind, habits of practice, practice and routine. Like, for instance, can a student sit down and listen to a story? Can a student stand in line? Can a student take turns? And we use the word play, but I would qualify that and say, not so much play, but really understanding social emotional needs of our students. And some of our students struggle with that self-regulation and self-reflection, right?
There's a for the record, there's a loud chorus of yes.
Some adults struggle with that as well. So those are the types of things that are not tangible, but they're important. And they're habits of mind that are not going to help the students in first grade, they're not going to help them in second grade, they're going to help them when they're at the high school and post-secondary level. So you're actually starting to build on that foundation of what I call good habits. A very basic good habits is that when you have a book in front of you, the TV isn't on. You're actually focused and you're engaged in that book. And I call them soft skills that kids are now are missing. Soft skills are in our culture, it's appropriate to look someone in the eye, and they acknowledge them. Some of our kids, because of cultural pieces, but also social emotional needs, actually struggle with those soft skills. Dr. McKinney, did I miss anything?
No, I was just going to add, at the kindergarten level, we're working with a reading specialist and our content area specialist and coming together with a kindergarten kind of district level and school level reports around their reading levels, letter ID, the K-1 early inventory, and then their math piece. So that's in development.
I know this is your first year, but have you known of a report that comes out and says we've been successful with so many? I mean, from a board member's point of view, I like to know if we're really good at making these kids prepared for first grade and second grade, so that we've been pushing for reading on grade level for the third grade. We've been pushing for that. And oftentimes I heard that from even middle school that they're not getting what they need at elementary school to make them successful at middle school. I've heard that. So, I mean, I want to, I've been on board 6 years now, and some of these scores that we've seen for reading and math are not that terrific. So it would behoove us, I think, to monitor the first 3 years of school well, so that we know that we're making progress. And if we're not making progress when they come out of kindergarten, are they not going to be doing well in first grade? So I'm really, really concerned about this.
We will bring something forward. Without having iReady in kindergarten, we have to bring some other things
Well,
forward.
that would be another question I would ask here, whether will you stop doing that? Whether these teachers really feel that it should have been stopped.
Yes.
Oh, well, there you go. So how are we going to show that we're being successful in educating our students? Okay, glad to hear it, because this
All right,
has
so
been...
anyway, so Dr. Osmond, you had a comment?
I want to just frame the context from an educational perspective. And we look at kids in terms of growth and where they start. And when I hear that when we use the tech reading on grade level, some of our kids come to our schools non-readers. And they can actually come to our schools in third grade as non-readers.
Yeah.
So if a student starts off, I'm going to make up a number, as a non-reader, but then by the end of third grade, they're on grade level in terms of first grade, that's growth.
Right.
Some of our kids come from trauma, some of our kids come from, in this case, my own kids come from a very healthy, robust background in terms of exposure to literacy, having 2 parents who have graduated college, which really presents an advantage for some of our kids. So rather than looking at the lens through, prove to me that these kids can read on grade level, prove to me that you are doing a good job. My reaction to the question is, we're going to show growth, we're going to show improvement, and where that kid starts off in terms of the baseline, whether they're non-readers or they're at their third grade level. And that I would encourage the board and the public to look at and evaluate all of our programs, not just the kindergarten program,
Well, the whole
Doug-
child.
and the whole child.
And that message has to get out to the public, because we're responsible for seeing that education is important and is done well in this city. And every budget time, we get beaten up all the time because we have all these, particularly by Mr. T-Boom. He's very quick to point out that we're in the 45th percentile.
30th.
Or whatever. And, you know, I think that somehow that message has to get out, that we are making progress. We did point out last year, I believe, or when it was Ms. Crevice was here, that we were making yearly growth in reading and STEM. But when we look at the data for next topic, doesn't look like we're doing it. So there's something that's discombobulated here. There's something that's not getting out. But as an elected official, it's my duty to oversee this district and making sure that our students are educated well. And I've been frustrated for the last 6 years, to be honest with you, sir.
Okay,
So
are you done?
I
Almost?
think you would like me to be done.
No.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm very frustrated, really
I
frustrated.
understand the frustration.
And if these children aren't getting what they need in kindergarten, then first grade's gonna suffer. They don't get what they need in first grade, third grade, all the way up the thing to 12th grade and graduation. I don't wanna go to my favorite pizza parlor and have the man tell me that this kid that works for him can't read his sign and he was educated in the district. I don't want that to ever happen to me again.
Okay, I have a follow-up, and then Mr. Kaufman had a question. So actually, my follow-up is exactly along that line, but a little bit more specific in terms of detail. The first two bullets there say formative assessments and the standards-based grading, evidence of learning. We know we've dropped the iReady district, and a number of us are so, brainwashed with things like the SBAC and PARC and all of those, computer-based, standards-based learning, which test, psychometrics for, resiliency and all this other stuff. So we have this knee-jerk reaction whenever we see the first couple of bullets. But the thing is, we forget that we can do standards-based grading and formative assessments without using things like that. And as a matter of fact, my question is, so does the Nashua School District, have we developed or are we developing our own formative assessment method? Or are we using some kind of a name-branded assessment technique? And if so, what is it? Very specific questions.
The formative assessments are embedded in Eureka, so these exit slips are exactly formative assessments.
Okay.
In writing, we have conferencing with students, and teachers do some direct instruction with that.
Mm-hmm.
In reading, we do guided reading, where teachers meet with students, and then they work independently in their reader's notebook and conference them as well. So do we use a generic program? The only one I could say is in math, in formative assessments. The other ones are specific to learning, because overall, working backwards, the goal of our teachers is they're collecting evidence towards grade level standards throughout the year that show where the student is towards those standards when they report out on a trimester basis. So this is an example from a kindergarten classroom.
Mm-hmm.
The standard is written on it. It's a bad picture, but shout out to Mount Pleasant for an exemplary piece of work here. And they have the students going through that, and that's an example of number knowledge and things like that. So that's one example.
Okay.
Do we use a specific program? No.
Okay, very good. Actually, in my thought, probably, especially at the kindergarten level, the best formative assessments are the least intrusive ones, that basically don't impact the child. Okay, so Mr. Kaufman, you have
Thank you.
a question.
Well, I guess it's a comment. I want to thank Ms. Van Twyver. I share her frustration and her comment. And my question was about the iReady. I was going to ask, should we reintroduce it into kindergarten? I know it's been answered. I just want to share with you I had the same question. But to Dr. Mosley's point of addressing growth, the data we get that is standardized and presented to us deals with students on or above level. Everything is, are you at level, national means, and all this stuff. So that's what we've been trained to look at and measure against. So when you make the argument, as valid as it may be, that we're looking for growth doesn't reflect in any of the data that's standardized that is currently used to measure, evaluate, or assess results. So you're in a rock and a hard place here. You can show growth, but it doesn't show up on any assessment that you present to us as here's what we're doing. I hope you, am I kind of making myself clear? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I'm just looking at these iReady reports.
I would just, we could talk about data a little bit. I'm sorry, what did you say?
Oh, no, sorry.
No, what's your
When
name?
you're looking at the whole child?
The whole child? Can I just capture what's your name? I'm just making
Oh,
reference.
boy.
We're on the spot. That's the hot chair officially for
See,
tonight.
you were talking.
I always get in the middle of the kindergarten celebrations,
Soft
too.
skills. Who's next?
I learned from all of them. So. I'm Nicole Osmond. I teach kindergarten at Fairgrounds.
Yes.
I was just going to say, when you asked about the principals checking in, I think at our school and at a lot of other schools we have collaborations. So we're checking in with our administration there every 7 days. So we're often talking about, you know, the whole child. We're looking at so many different things. We're not just talking about where they are in math, but we're talking about like maybe why, like what's really going on, what, you know, not just, oh, can they count to 10, like there's more, something, sometimes we have to look at more than just an assessment piece. I know that's data is very important. I get data, we talk about it a lot, but it's just, the iReady data is, for us, it just was they took the test twice a year or 3 times, and it was like a practice for them to become experienced, right, at getting ready to take a computerized test. And it was, I mean, we felt we didn't learn a ton of information from that data, like it didn't give us accurate information. Thank you. So it's very nerve-wracking up here.
I just wanted to say, when we go through the data piece, maybe we can talk a little bit about, like, what I really want to emphasize is the whole child, and we're just looking at one assessment, which is iReady. There are other assessments that you could use to, what I would call, look at the whole child. And in fact, actually what Dr. McKinney had prepared for us in terms of an examination. So my reaction would be, that's one source of data. The other piece is the social emotional pieces that can't be qualified or measured on a assessment. And so there are a variety of factors to look at when you're looking at things.
It's Mr. Farrington, and then you after. Are you done, Doctor?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I've tried to be good, can't. I understand growth, I get it, and I think it's very important and it's critical, and if you've got a student that's 2 years behind when they come to you and they grow a year and a half, they're still a half a year behind, but they've accomplished a lot. But they gotta grow towards something.
Right.
And if they become sophomores and juniors in high school and they're reading at a 4th grade level, they haven't grown enough. And so we also have to look at that. We can't wait until they graduate from high school, and then they have to take remedial reading, math courses in order to be able to take courses at the community college. And so it has to be a combination of both. And so I just pulled up here some old SNCAP stuff, but it's 2010 through 2013, and when we follow a cohort group, they're 73% proficient at 3rd grade, 79% at 3rd grade, 73% at 4th grade, 69% at 5th grade. I think we have to look at those things too. I think it's part of the whole picture. And we can say that iReady is just a snapshot in time, but I think that if 43% of your students are reading on level like that snapshot, it's highly unlikely that if you took another picture, it's going to be 80%. It's probably fairly indicative within the confines of what that tests of what their accomplishments are, where they are. And I think that has to also be a part of the discussion, and we have to show, I mean, growth is going to be a measure between two points, and if both of those points are valid to determine growth, then the latter point also has to be valid to determine where they are relative to where they should be. And then, of course, in iReady, it's early, mid, late level, and all that other stuff. So.
Okay, thank you. Are you done?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Ms. Betwiler?
I'd like to follow up on the
Nicole, I
iReady.
wasn't picking on you.
Oh, no, I know.
Thank you for doing that.
I'd like to follow up on the iReady, and someone said it was not accurate enough.
Correct.
It seems to me that a kindergarten student has been playing with all these video appropriate for their age, games and whatever, that taking a test like iReady for kindergarten should be okay. I mean, they're used to, all right, good, let's hear it.
How to do that? Anybody want to swipe? Mary, go.
I guess, can I just ask for the public, if you want to ask the question, and then maybe someone can come up and answer the question. So as we're answering, as the question's being asked, then we can get some commentary back. So I'd say, come on up, Mary?
Yes.
That's my mom's name.
You gotta give your last name, Mary, for the recorder.
Okay, Mary Crum, Amherst Street School.
So ask the question and then,
The question is, what's wrong with using iReady in kindergarten to test their abilities?
Quite a few things. One thing is that a lot of our students, even though they can use all of those devices, come into a computer lab, which is where we give the test, and they touch the screen. And so we have to teach them how to use a mouse, and they don't know how to use that. And there's a lot of computer instruction that you need to have before you can take that. You think it's a simple test, but it really requires you to be able to use a mouse and to be able to move over, and you have headphones on, and you have to go up and you have to find a little area to click in order to have it read to you if you can't read it. So there is so much computer instruction that needs to happen before you can take it. Did the kids take it? They did. What they did was they clicked next, 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 and then a game pops up. And so one of my best students, I said, "You're not listening to the question." And he said, "There's a game at the end." Looked at me like, "There's a game at the end." So, and then the student that was struggling ended up being my top math student. He couldn't read. He was a refugee student, and he could count to 2. And he was my top math student with iReady data because he looked at the person next to him and he clicked the same button. And my principal said, "Well, the tests aren't the same." And I said, "You and I know that, but he doesn't know that." So he just looked to see what this person clicked, and he clicked the same one. And he was my top math student. And I think spending time looking at that data, it gave them a lot of really bad habits. They really were not practicing good habits of taking that test that they need to have. They need to be taught how to take that test. And it requires a lot of computer knowledge.
and some of our students don't have computers at home.
Right.
Or that resource. So that's another challenge. Mr. Cobb? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, Mr. Cobb, are you done, Ms. Bentweiler?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Cobb.
So here's my question. Are we asking too much of our kindergarten students when it comes to technology? And I'm seeing some heads agree, I don't know about everybody. So, and my follow-up to that is, if we're asking too much in technology, are we asking too much in other areas? Which gets back to an argument in terms of logical discussion, Socratic method thing. Discussion about play, and is there enough play, mix of play and educational topics, or are we asking these kids to do too much too soon, which may in fact impact the desire to learn? We don't want to knock it out of them that they don't want to learn anymore because it was a bad experience. We want the play and education to be fun and enlightening throughout life, right? So I guess the question is, are we asking too much of our kindergarten students, A, computer-wise, and B, in other areas?
Can I just interject? I guess my question is, and just to ask the question is just keep it simple.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, I'm thinking of computer skills. One of the best software programs I've come into account is called Keyboard Without Tears. Have you ever heard of that? Keyboard Without Tears. It's very simple. It just teaches the kids how to type. And guess what they do? B, 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 B. A, 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 A. And it's slowly and surely they learn how to spread their hands and type efficiently. I think that is something, when we're talking about those soft skills and skills they'll need for the rest of their lives, I think perhaps keeping it simple would allow kids to not necessarily get to a game, but get to learn through play a technology skill that they'll need for the rest of their lives. And I guess that's the question, if I'm posing that to the teachers, and if that's not the recommendation, then I guess we could get some feedback.
Just maybe this is the wrong time to interject.
Can you switch chairs with her?
We just need your name.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Carter, kindergarten at next door at Ledge Street School. And Dr. Mosley and I, we've had a discussion about this initially, but this probably brings up another topic in kindergarten this year, is the equity among all of the schools with specialist time. To bring up computers, that would be lovely. However, I do not have computer lab as part of a specialist. If I take my students to the computer lab, I'm the instructor. And quite frankly, we're not quite ready to go there yet. So this brings up the topic of some of the schools, computers are taught for them, and in our school, it is not the case. So that brings up fairness for all. I think that's a discussion we need to be having. And yes, I agree with you, that sounds like a wonderful program that could probably hit a couple of topics. There's the letter B, there's practice for B, and you're learning computer skills. So, and again, to piggy on what Mary was saying, our students are coming to us learning how to use a phone. That's it, they've totally bypassed computers. So the fact that I can't, or I have to stop teaching something else so that I have to teach computer skills now, means I'm not doing the other things I should be doing, and they're missing something that I think could set some really good habits along the way. So does that answer that? Thank you.
Are you done?
Yeah.
I have a follow-up to this
Me?
question
Okay.
for you.
All right.
But I don't feel my question's really been answered.
Do you wish to do a follow-up?
Well, is there anybody else who'd like to address it? Are we, I didn't
Restate
hear.
the question.
Restate the
Howard. I
question?
think she didn't maybe get what the question was.
Oh,
Oh, sort of, are we asking too much of our kindergarten?
I think, I don't know that we're
In terms of
asking.
technology and in terms of, and I left the door open to
Okay.
make another suggestion.
I think, ladies, maybe support me in this. I think if we are allowed to let the children be children, and we ease them into their education with academics and appropriate play and experience and exposure and good teaching and social skills, I think we're all going to make some really good progress. Does it look the same or feel the same for every single student? I think you'll agree with me, no, it does not. I think there's a time and a place for really structured assessment. I don't know that kindergarteners are ready for that. I think we've all learned that when we take those kinds of tests, you're not necessarily getting an accurate answer, and that's why we were also negative on iReady. It's perfectly wonderful for first grade and on. I just do not think it's appropriate for kindergarten. So we weren't saying no to iReady and the results
No,
it
I
could give you.
understand that, but
It just, for kindergartners, honestly, 4 of my students didn't turn 5 until the last day of September.
Yeah.
So my classroom is made up of 6-year-olds and 4-year-olds on the first day of school. That's a really big gap.
May I ask a follow-up?
Yes, follow-up?
So I am thrilled to hear what you just said. And I appreciate the balance and how you have to mix and match, and every student is in and of itself its own growing flower, as it were. So here's my question. Does the pot that flower sit in, is it big enough for the roots to flourish? Does it get enough water? Does it get enough sun? Does your curriculum have the flexibility it needs for you to customize that fit? Or are we, as a board and the State Board of Education, coming and saying, you've got to do these things? What are there, 90 some odd things in the Common Core standard for kindergarten, if I remember correctly?
I think it's 93
Thank you.
requirements.
So there are 93 requirements, Common Core requirements for kindergarten. So are we as a board and as a state imposing too much on you so that you can, I love the way you described that. That's what I want to hear. Okay, so thank you so much. But, so I want to make sure you can do that. Okay, and so that's really what my question is. When I ask, are we asking too much? It's those standards. Are we driving them down so far that you cannot do what you know that needs to be done? So that's...
My thinking, and ladies help me out, I think the standards are the standards. And I think that some of the kids are going to rise to the occasion and do beautifully well in them. And the other kids, it's going to take them more time. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And maybe that's the whole point of evidence-based assessment and that kind of thing, that they're just going to show evidence for whatever they can do. If you ask me this year what it looks like, my answer is totally different than what I would have given you last year. And I think as teachers, we all know, you don't know what it's going to look like. And I think there does need to be some commonality to what we need to teach and how we teach it, but I think every year will look different. My test scores this year, I'll be hopeful and I will love fiercely and strongly, yes, yes, I will. But I think this year's class doesn't look like last year's class, so it's not a one-size-fits-all, and I think we need to have some sort of commonality with that.
I think with just one last thing, that the law, yeah, does give us flexibility in terms of what we implement. So that is thank you so much for coming out tonight. Nobody, at least it's not snowing or raining, it's not too cold. So it's this feedback we want to make informed decisions. We did try to reach out to the kindergarten teachers last year. We were unable to get the previous administration to put a questionnaire out there to you. So for you guys to come and give us a small sampling tonight is greatly appreciated. We want as much feedback whenever you have. Please share it with us. I'll stop because we have a lot of stuff.
Well, thank you. And I do actually have a follow-up, which Dr. Mosley and Dr. McKinney can help you out on.
Oh, okay.
So following up on Mr. Kaufman's comment, he's absolutely right. State legislature passed and the governor signed legislation that actually allows local districts like ours to basically have some flexibility in what we choose to implement or not implement out of those Common Core standards. So the thing is, we live and work in the second largest public school laboratory in the state. And as we have adopted full-day kindergarten, we have probably got the second largest number of kindergarten teachers in the state. And as day by day, month by month, you teach our children, I think we collectively are in probably the best situation of all in the state for us to be able to kind of, look with jaundiced eye possibly at those 93 standards and to determine for our school whether or not we agree with all of them, whether we think we should be adding some to that list that aren't being covered, or whether or not some of them could be deferred into first, second, or third grade and not necessarily covered in kindergarten. But I implore you, as you make that discovery in the months to come, please tell the district, communicate that to Dr. McKinney and to Dr. Mosley, so that they can actually, document that and then formally feed that back to the state at some future time. And I think that would be extremely useful to the State Department of Education. That's what we're looking for.
Thank you, Dr. Martaki, and I think in the next presentation, Dr. McKinney is going to talk about that mechanism to reporting out with collaboration with the teachers, principals, central office. So thank you for a nice segue. But
And I have another follow-up that's actually akin more towards one of Mrs.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
The lady that spoke about teaching the kids how to use, or the kids are learning how to use a phone, is that a cell phone or an old-fashioned phone?
They don't know what, they don't know what, we have to show pictures or YouTube videos or something like that on this is what's a telephone, so.
Just a telephone?
They've bypassed totally that whole entire.
That's ancient technology. You find those in museums.
Hey, my house isn't a museum.
Or they can, change your email.
Okay, actually, I'd like to ask my follow-up before we go to Mrs. Oden and then Mr. Farrington. So my second follow-up, and you can get help from Dr. Mosley and from Dr. McKinney again. So the thing is, an earlier question related to, technology and equity of access. The template that this district had for full-day kindergarten was Title I schools. And we've known for years that there were non-Title I schools that had economically disadvantaged students attending there, and that not all students of the Title I school were economically disadvantaged. So we have instances in Title I schools where you have two college-educated live-in parents that just, fully populate their homes with all kinds of tech. And these kids come to pre-K knowing how to use everything ranging from a regular computer with or without a touch screen to a smartphone. I know when my kids came to school, they knew already how to sit and type in an IBM PC or play on a Game Boy. And that was a stupendous advantage for my children because they had that benefit. And just like the example Dr. Mosley, portrayed. So the question I've got is that now that we are in full-day kindergarten, and now that we have applying that same evolving model to our non-Title I and our Title I schools, I think that we should be looking to try to figure out what pieces of the Title I full-day kindergarten model can we bring to all of our schools, but how can we also enrich full-day kindergarten experience for all the schools where we are not necessarily trying to remedy economic disadvantage. So I think that we're at the cusp of an opportunity here where we can basically not only apply full-day kindergarten to try to equalize things for children of all economic backgrounds, but to also possibly make things better and to provide an opportunity for children that come from non-disadvantaged homes. And I think when we do that, we'll actually make things better for all of the kids. So, okay. So Mrs. Oden, you had a question?
I was just going to say, when I go around to some of the schools and talk to some of the teachers, what I'm hearing is that iReady is administered to all students, but it's not always administered the same way. There are some students that go into a lab. We heard somebody say that. There are some places where they take the carts and bring them into the classroom, and maybe 10 kids take it, or maybe 2 or 3 kids take it with somebody looking over their shoulder. And then I've heard of another school where the students are not allowed to click the mouse, that they have a para beside them and they have to read it. So you're getting a test administered several different ways, and that often affects the data. So I personally don't think the iReady is tremendously accurate in a lot of ways. And I guess I go back to math. I taught first grade with Mary at Amherst Street, and we had a district level math test. Cecile Carlton was a math curriculum person, and everybody gave the same test. We had the same protocols. We scored it all the same, and it was based on what we had taught during the year. And I'm just wondering if you people feel it would be better if Nashua developed their own tests rather than using an iReady or something else that's been purchased. Would our students be served better, and would our teaching be evaluated by ourselves, by teachers better and more accurately if we developed the end of the year test or some of the benchmarks?
Mrs. Oden, before we go on, does the question apply to kindergarten testing or all?
Well, kindergarten and all. I think we used to have it. I believe you had a kindergarten test from the district. It went all the way through 5th and 6th grade when we had 6th grade. So I'd just like to know if that would be more valuable.
I just,
Hey, she's out of
She jumped out of that
Trish Fuller, principal at Charlotte. So I understand where you're coming from, but that's exactly what Eureka's testing is doing. It's exactly what they're teaching, and then they're measuring it. So they do pre and post, and they're getting a sense of, did they learn what they taught? To add another layer of our own created test, it's making more work because they're doing those assessments anyway. The same is true with reading. We keep going back to the Common Core. There's a scope and sequence of skill development for reading, for math, and kindergarten teachers know them well because they can't move on until they taught that skill. Yes, you're going to find those skills in the Common Core. We are going to expose children to many skills that sometimes they need many practices with. But they need to follow the scope and sequence of skills and teach it to the greater good by using those formative assessments, those exit tickets. They're getting a sense of, who do I pull in a small group? Who isn't getting that skill? But it's really important that we do utilize the scope and sequence, because we need to make sure, we keep talking about the growth. There are students who come, they can't hold a pencil. They don't know a letter versus a number. And that's in our kindergarten.
Right.
And then we have the third grade reader in the same kindergarten. So there's such a span. It's really important that we do quick assessments, which they do, and you know, because you used to do them. It's very easy. Do they know the alphabet? Do they know uppercase, lowercase? Do they know numbers? And then they start pulling groups and start doing overview of different instruction strategies with the group. So it is really important that we do pre-test and post-test to make sure we're seeing the growth. When the child that came in who doesn't know their letters versus numbers is actually reading as they're leaving, and the words are very simplistic, but they're reading, then we celebrate. Are the children where we want them? No. But we have to keep instructing where they are, exposing them to where they need to be, and filling it in. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, hang on. We have Mr. Hallowell.
Nope.
Mr. Farrington, and then Mr. Coughlin. Sorry about that.
Well, what you said, you know, I don't know if it's an advantage or disadvantage of being a non-educator, but my experience has been that, and I would expect that for kindergarten teachers, you more than anyone else, any other teachers in the district, have to practice individualized instruction.
Absolutely.
Because I've seen somebody who just turned 5 in September, who could read, knew all of these things that they were supposed to know when they left. And I didn't want to see him just said, you've made it, we're just going to give you some coloring papers. He needs to be challenged too.
Absolutely.
And yet you have, like you said, those children who don't have any numbers or anything else. And so, as somebody else mentioned, you can have 5 and 6-year-olds in 11 months. It's such a huge difference at that age for the children as they develop emotionally and physically. You know, I mean, my grandson, who could read and all, was exhausted by Wednesday of the week.
Absolutely. Stamina.
So, yeah. So I respect
They're
everything.
exhausted too. They're exhausted
Oh, I know
too.
they are. And I sat in on a half day, when they had the half day, watching the teacher. I was exhausted. So I think it's terrific, but I think it's something that the individualized instruction obviously is the single biggest thing. 15 or 20 kids, the range can be incredible.
Dr. Mosley pointed out that just those soft skills, the last 6 weeks have been about how to do school, how to sit in the chair, how to sit on that colored square and not roll over in your front. The change that we've seen in the 6 weeks, because honestly, the first 2 weeks of school, everyone was overwhelmed, because we had 4-year-olds and we had 6-year-olds.
Yes.
We had people wetting their pants.
Yep.
Because they didn't know to ask. We take them, but they can ask at any time, and we'll bring them again. But to see the change in all the classes, they follow, they know, they can follow a couple steps in most cases at this point with visual cues and good modeling. So we see a lot of growth in a short time.
Yes.
And it is amazing. But you're right, we have the challenge of that little 5-year-old who is reading.
Yep.
And we want to move him, because every student deserves to make a year's progress in a year. And that is our mantra all the time. But these teachers need to be so skilled, because they need to know the curriculum below them, the curriculum they're teaching, and the curriculum above, because they need to keep moving. So, can I just go back to one question you asked earlier?
Certainly.
How do we know at the end of the year? We talk with our kindergarten teachers all the time. I can tell you already who is dramatically below grade level and who's the readers. I can tell you because we go in and watch too. We want to see how these students are doing. So it should never come as a surprise at the end of the year who's struggling or who's really achieving. And when we talk placement, we're always talking about what skills do they have, what do they need, how can we best support them. It is always our goal. It's that year progress. It's hard to show in some testing, but we're looking and saying, what is their projected growth on iReady? So where do they start? Where should they be? And are we getting there? So, I mean, it's a balancing act with the different ranges, and they're at all grade levels too. Kindergarten, it's very dramatic though.
Because honestly, by January, they look at their kids and they say, I did that. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Mr. Kaufman, before I go to you, Mrs. Hohensee, did I hear,
Yeah, I was just going to say,
did you have a question?
I do have a whole bunch of questions. I've been enjoying the conversation, and I'm thrilled that you have so many teachers there with so much common sense and experience that I'm very reassured that they understand the balance between play and academics. What I'm concerned about is that they have the flexibility that they need, not only for the very younger kindergarten students and the very mature ones that are already reading, but maybe the students that are only coming in half the class day, so that they can not let anybody feel like they're not keeping up or they're way, behind everybody, because I'm more interested in their joy of learning by the end of the year than the data that they give me. If they're happy, they're going to learn. If they're miserable, we've got an uphill battle. So I just want to know that the teachers have all the flexibility and tools that they need to maximize what they're working with. I don't know if anybody could answer that.
Well, I can respond for my building. I would say to you that, which is Charlotte, and I would say it's probably in all, with kindergartners, they have to take the lead from the students. So they really do have to make sure they're with them. They can't push them further than they're able to go. So they are doing a lot of transition, a lot of quick lessons, and a lot of gross motor activities to keep them focused and being able to. They're the ones who are driving the bus, the teachers, and they're the ones who are assessing and kind of making the plans to address the needs of their students. So I would say that they've got that flexibility and they know where they're going. And sometimes it starts real slow in kindergarten. Because skills, they're trying to fill in some of those basic skills that weren't there before. Just mine. Anyone else?
Do we separate the very younger kids that say 6 months younger than some of the, there could be a 11 or 12 month gap. Do we do that, or
No, we range. We do heterogeneous grouping because if we had all the young ones together, we want to utilize our models too. And just because they're younger doesn't necessarily mean they're the ones who are behind. Sometimes they're the precocious learners. So we want to utilize them too.
That's true.
We do want to see that range of ages and abilities within a class.
Okay, thank you very much.
So Ms. Olsey, do you have follow-ups, or was that what you wanted to ask?
Well, my only other concern is the students that might be coming in for half day. Do they get behind more and more so, or are we just the teachers flexible enough to just help them as they come in, progress and get the growth they need over the year given the time they're putting in?
Does anybody have any parents that only bring their kids for half a day?
No.
Could I get a sense, I was going to ask for the district, across the district, roughly how many students come in regularly for half a day?
I would say less than 5 to 10.
5 to 10, a handful. I'm
5
only
or 10
aware of
out of
only one
700
situation
maybe?
within the last 2 weeks.
Doris, I'm smiling and I'm looking at you. So. All right.
That's good.
So, just to be clear, Doris, I'm smiling, I'm looking at you, that we have a parent-selected half-day kindergarten, meaning that it is the parents that come in and choose to pick up kids for a half a day. Is that fair enough,
Right.
Doris?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
I'm smiling.
exactly.
Okay, so with that said, there's just, roughly speaking, about 10 parents or families that elect to do that.
Out of how many students? 780?
Yeah,
Something like
I'd
that?
say that's
Around 800? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So Doris, do you have any other follow-up questions?
No, that's very good, and I've enjoyed the conversation. Again, I want to thank all the kindergarten teachers that came out tonight. It's very, very helpful to listen directly to those teachers.
Okay, so Mr. Kaufman, then Mr. Hallowell.
I'll defer to Mr. Hallowell.
Mr. Hallowell.
So I just want to, as Ms. Van Twyver said, sorry, I didn't call you Dr. Van Twyver. So
No one does.
when I think about assessment data as a board member, the reason that I want it is I want to understand what's the investment we need to make. And so iReady may not be the right answer. Maybe you all have it in your head. And particularly, let's take something, well, it's not simple, but it's sort of a very basic thing of reading. Understanding where your students start and whether they get that growth in a year is important for us, because maybe we need to make policy decisions about how old you really should be if you're going to be in first grade, or maybe we need to think about, are there programs we ought to put in place for the kids that we know are going to come in underachieving? So we have some of those. Do we need more of those? Right? So when I'm looking at data, it's not because I want to score anybody's ability to do anything. It's that I want to understand we have a finite number of resources that we can spend. Where should we be spending them? And so if we had a ton of kids that were 5 years old and they're all reading at the third grade level, right? That's a whole different problem than somebody who's, close to, over 6 and they can't read at all, right? That's a very different problem to try to solve. And so I guess I'm asking for help because understanding that is important to the board. And right now, iReady may not be the perfect answer. And I understand that when you look at individual students, there's some inaccuracies there. But looking as a whole, it's not inconsistent with all the other data we have in the district about where our students are, right? So it tells us something about growth at certain levels. Maybe not at kindergarten, but it's certainly at higher levels. So I'm asking for your help in understanding what is it we need to know from you to understand where your students are and what kind of resources we need to apply. I heard somebody say they had a long list of things that they'd like to see. And I'd always preface it with, you just can't say more teachers. But if you have a list of those kinds of things, what kinds of resources do you need? What kind of flexibility do you need? That's what the board would like to help with.
Smaller class size. You talked about the individual, like meeting with the individual child and working with them. And I think
It was a nice try. It was a very nice try. You were looking at Mr. Farrington and trying not to have to sit there.
Very good. Now you got to come up and identify yourself.
Laura Nelson, and I'm kindergarten teacher over at Fairgrounds. And I just want to say, we're talking about those smaller class sizes and having more para support because so much of our time is spent teaching individual and small groups, which is so hard to accomplish when you have that child who's just turned 5 and then you have that other child reading at a third grade level. It's hard to keep all those kids busy, entertained, learning without someone there maybe helping them do that.
So Mr. Farrington, did she just cheat? Smaller class sizes equals more teachers, right?
But give her credit.
Nice try.
She made a point. And I understand.
Problem
I
will be
really do.
solved, really.
But I'm sitting, no, but you see, I sit here as a board member and think, we don't have rooms. You see, everything is, there are other issues that go along with it, but perhaps the answer is paras or something like that, that other kind of support, looking at class size. And I think we're going to learn a lot this year as we've expanded it into more schools. I mean, some other things are givens that we've had for the 5 schools for a long time, but no, I understand.
I'm just going to speak. We are sharing paras amongst the 5 kindergarten and we talked about that, making it even across all the schools, so we're all getting even para support. But right now we're not. We're sharing that para support. Some are sharing 1 among 3. You know what's going on in the schools too. But yeah, so we are sharing that support, which is tough because we all follow the same schedule too. So we all want to run our language arts at the same time, and we all want to run our math blocks at the same time. And that's when we need most help, is when we're doing that direct instruction. So.
Mr. Farrington, do you have a follow-up?
No.
Okay. We'll do Mrs. Soden and then Mr. Kaufman.
I was going to say, at one time I believe every kindergarten had a para. If administration...
No, we 1 or 2. Full day.
You were 1
Title
para
1.
or 2?
Full. Since I've been teaching, I've been 15 years full day kindergarten. I have had para support just for myself every year.
Title I schools.
Title I.
Title I.
But we're a Title I. That's
And I was just added on because there were so many kindergarten kids.
So 5 years ago, I was added on new into the district, so they, at Fairgrounds, hired now 5 kindergarten teachers. It used to be 4. So we kept the 4 para supports.
But even before that, we didn't report them. It changes.
So it changes, it varies.
And same with, depending on the school.
That might be some
Depends on,
interesting
however the principal
information for us
allocated
to
it.
have.
So you're new to the district?
5 years.
And you're making trouble?
Her name is Mary Crum.
We got So who do we know? I know Mary Crum.
And so do you have a follow-up?
No.
Okay, Mr. Kaufman?
Well, thanks. So, no, Mr. Farrington, that's reserved for me. I'm the one who makes the trouble. So here's the reality check, just to kind of bring everybody to how we got in the situation we're in. Last year, the board decided to implement a full-day kindergarten. The way that happened was to, number one, increase the class sizes in 1st through 5th grade and move 10 of those teachers into the kindergarten positions. At the time, there was no request for any paras, and we were told that it was going to be budget neutral. So we're working, that's how we got where we are. So now we're hearing all this, and we have already approved 2 additional, I think one was for kindergarten, one was for 1st grade, two additional slots. So we're aware, but I want you to know where we came from, because that's what we're faced with. Because now we have all these extra kids in the other grades. You want a lower class size? Well, we had lower class sizes, but to implement kindergarten, we had to increase them everywhere else throughout all the elementary schools. So the trade-offs are awful, and we have budget constraints that are genuine and real. So please know that absolutely are grateful that you're here, absolutely appreciate the work you do. We want, yeah, sure, we'd give you everything we want, everything you want if we could, but we can't. So the creativity piece is really what distinguishes how you make do with what you don't have. But if there are things that we can help you with, we want to do that.
But are we in a better place than we were last year?
Yes, absolutely.
I just
So
think
I do have something else, but I think it probably belongs in this.
Okay, we're getting so close. Right, we are. We only have a few minutes left on this segment, and then we have to move on to the next one. So I'm going to exercise my chair's authority to do 2 questions. One of them actually is a reflection on your latest comment, and I'm glad that Dr. Mosley walked into the room. I've personally been responsible for introducing a number of new programs throughout my career. And no matter how carefully planned that is, we're all human, and all kinds of interesting things pop up that we didn't anticipate 6 months ago or 9 months ago or whatever. So my question is that now that we have a whole month's worth of experience with this brand new full-day kindergarten under our belt, and as we go through the next, say, 8 months, what I'm hoping that this district can do, including inputs from all of the teachers and all of the building principals, is where there are things that we approved as a board, and as we move into getting more and more experience under our belts with full-day kindergarten, were they things that we either overlooked or couldn't afford to budget in the budget process that we should really pay attention to fixing? And you know, I won't be here come January, but the next budget cycle is going to be starting very, very soon. So if you have things that the board should be thinking about funding to make full-day kindergarten experience better for Nashua and better for our children and better for our parents and the teachers and the paras and the building principals, what are those? And of course, we're going to have to shuffle all of those priorities with everything else because we don't want to throw the rest of the kids under the bus. But we do want to have a very good experience because you know what? As one of our members stated earlier, kindergarten is very, very important. It was Mrs. Hornsey that basically said that we need to make sure that the children enjoy the educational experience, because if they enjoy it coming out of full-day kindergarten, especially if this is their very first crack at public education. They will learn in the years to come. So please, put your thinking caps on. You know, administrators, teachers, parents, and for all of the parents that are thinking out there, you know, think about that. We'd like to get your input. Write it down so you don't forget it, and then make sure that you pass it on to your building principals and to the administration here and to the board. We really want your input because this is a learning experience for all of us. Okay, my second question is actually about parents in the classroom. You know, I used to be a Cub Scout leader, including of the very, very youngest level, the Tiger Cubs. I've also been a Girl Scout leader, I all the way from Daisy Girl Scouts. And one of the things that Scouts love, Scout leaders, especially at those early ages, is that we like to see parents come into our meetings. And I do know that a number of private kindergartens, I don't know about public kindergartens, but we used to also like to see parents come in with their children to help at least through part of the day, especially if they had special needs. So my final question for tonight before we segue into our data section is, what is our policy on parents in the classroom? Do we welcome parents to come in with their children? Do they have to sign up officially as parent volunteers, go through that entire process of being fingerprinted, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
So could someone explain how a parent volunteer comes in with their kindergartner?
We don't, I mean, again, I'll defer to the teachers on this. We do have a policy around parent volunteers, and they do have to be fingerprinted. They are coordinated, and we do a background check on them. So there's nothing that if a parent's a parent, you can't prevent the parent from being with their kids. So we typically, when we see parent involvement at the elementary level, it's usually for field trips, like activities going on at the school, anything like that. But in terms of parent participation at the kindergarten level, I'll defer to the teachers on that. I don't think we have too much of that, no? And, oh, go ahead, Tris.
Depends.
Someone shaking their head.
Kathy's saying she'll get up.
No, I just,
We
real quickly.
we organize it. It's arranged ahead of time, and we do it usually.
Oh, the principal's walking up.
Trish, blow your child out. We typically set it up so the parents come in through rotations when we're doing centers, so that we have a second set of hands. And they are done through scheduling, so that you know, and it's two-ply. There are some parents who really want to get in the classroom, and others feel guilty that they can't. So we set it up ahead of time, and it's after the routines are established, because right now they're still learning how to do school. And once they're in a rhythm, we introduce a parent volunteer to kind of help get through. But each teacher does what works for their classroom. And sometimes parents know that them going in is going to really set off their child.
Right.
And it's not going to be productive.
I see, okay.
Because you don't want them crying every time you come in.
The parent or the child?
Yes.
Well, the reason I asked actually is that at one time I was a parent volunteer, and it was in Nashua High School, generic. We didn't split into North and South back in those days. I was a very highly qualified algebra tutor in the Nashua High Schools as a volunteer. And I had to go through all of that,
Yeah.
registered and fingerprinted, the whole thing. I know a number of people who are parents that have attention deficit or autistic children, and some of them are, you know, wanting to come into the classroom so that they can help the teacher and the limited number of paras that we have, you know, to take care of their handful of child. You know, and you all know, you know, if the child is ADD or ADHD or autistic or, you know, there are some special needs that really need almost one-on-one attention in order to make sure that child is adequately supported. So I'm just wondering, you know, do we welcome parents to come in and help with their children with special needs, or not?
that's a whole different conversation than
Yeah.
kindergarten. I mean, honestly, with kindergarten, it really is a short visit, it's purposeful. We struggle
Okay.
bringing parents in, especially intensive needs or special needs, because reality is, they have the child most of the night.
Right.
And during the day, the child has to learn to work with a variety of people.
Okay.
So it's also sometimes tricky when you're bringing people into small rooms. You're exposing other students to other parents, and there's that confidentiality issue is
I understand.
huge.
I do understand.
And it's really important that we keep students' needs private.
Yes.
So we struggle. I mean, it really is teacher by teacher, even without around the room. There's certain times that there's years that, you know, you say this year, who knows? It may not be the year to have parent volunteers. They may add chaos to something.
As opposed to help.
Whereas other times, you're like, this is the class I want to go through school with. I'm going to keep going with them. It's great, and the parents, so it really is, it's got to be productive for both, the students and the teacher and the parent.
Thank you very much. That was a great answer, and I think you're right. I think that possibly in a future discussion that we may actually want to talk about that later. So thank you very much. And I think we should get to the data section now. Okay, so please introduce the next discussion. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. You enjoyed it immensely.
Thank you, kindergarten teachers.
Have them home and sleep so they can do it all
And
night.
administrators. Get some rest.
The school starts early, right?
Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. McKinney, on with the discussion on data.
So I'll be talking about two things, our data over the past few years and some action items that we can take into consideration for reviewing our data and moving student learning forward. So this is a composite list of all the data sources we have in the district, ranging from summative data towards the end of the year, some at the state level, all the way to some formative data that's used on a regular basis in the classrooms. As was spoken about earlier, try to keep this in context of the whole child. You're looking at their emotional, physical, social, and cognitive growth. So some of the things that we keep in mind, learning environment matters, positive feedback, encouragement, support and practice, and monitoring student work.
Can I stop you? Dr. Elsie, can you try turning off one of those
Oh, sorry.
switches behind you? I thought those were light switches up there. I don't know. Yeah, that's better.
Is that better?
Much better.
Thank you.
So in looking at the whole child, we'll begin looking at our iReady overview. So just a reminder, iReady is using grades 1 through 8 in reading and math. It gives data-driven insights for teachers to determine where to focus their instruction. It also helps with deciding which kids are in need of intervention. It reports out in tiers. So tier 1 is students who are on grade level, tier 2 a level below, and students who are in red or 2 levels below.
Is that 2 or more levels in a particular skill area? Like in other words, say math, and so they take a test, they don't have a competency in, say, 3-digit math. So you're looking at what they needed to get there, and they couldn't do 2. If you can't do 3, you might not be able to do 2.
Right.
But it is within the context of that same
Band. I'll show you here, but it'll be both in overall performance and then the skills underneath those subject areas like in math.
So Dr. McKinney, before we go on, would you rather have us let you go through the entire presentation and save our questions for the end, or would you like to be fielding the questions?
I can do either. Yeah, I think given what I heard earlier, if we maybe could go through and then talk at the end.
Okay.
Because I hear the urgency around data,
Right.
but I also think there's some action items that are proposed that would be
So,
good discussion.
Why don't we let Dr. McKinney get through the entire presentation of data first, and then we'll keep our questions towards the
I
end.
just have one question. How late is this meeting going to go? Are we going to stay within our 7:30?
We
Or are
will,
you going later to accommodate what is an important topic?
well, the thing
You
is,
can't do it in 15 minutes, is what I'm
Well,
trying to
we-
say.
I think we can do the overall description of the data. At 7:30, we'll basically call for a vote of the committee to determine whether or not we want to stay later to field questions or to defer those questions for a later meeting. So we'll leave it up to a committee vote at that time. So please, Dr. McKinney, continue.
Okay.
And we'll hold our questions until we know.
All right, thank you. So this is a graph that shows the percentage of students reaching proficiency on level and higher from the fall and spring in the area of math. So green is fall, where they took it in the fall, and then blue is our spring performance. So you can see the growth our students have made over the course of the 2016-17 school year. If you take that growth and compare it with the national comparison, again, the blue is Nashua and the gray is the national comparison for students reaching proficiency in math on level and higher. You can see that we either perform, in most cases, at or above the national average. But as we talked about earlier, iReady does have its limitations. I understand the need for some hard data, but it's obviously technology-based. It has limited depth of knowledge question format, meaning it doesn't get to the higher levels. They're typically levels 1 and 2, which are lower on the scale. And you heard the kindergarten teachers talk about the amount of time it takes for kids to persevere, attend, focus, and there is a need for teacher monitoring, particularly at the younger levels, for kids not to do some high-speed clicking and get into the game. Mr. Kaufman, you spoke earlier about the levels. I'm sorry, that keeps popping up. That little picture there shows where those tiers would come out on. So when it's reported out, you would get a score for all those things. So us for math, our takeaways, right now we have a math coach who's working K-8 and delivering PD and helping teachers with some concrete models and manipulatives to help students learn mathematical concepts. We're using OGAP in grades 3 to 5, which is a great framework for learning. And when you asked earlier about formative assessments, that is given during the course of the year, and it helps teachers understand where kids are in that framework, and then they supplement their instruction with an item bank that helps kids move along from doing additive strategies. So if you were doing 5 plus 5 and getting to 10, they would be adding it, getting all the way to 5 plus 2 is multiplicative, the higher end of the scale. We're working towards a common curriculum using Eureka K-8. We revised our pacing. There was conversation here about kindergarten and making decisions. So the first year we had a large number of days built in. This year we scaled it way back. I think we're like in the 140 days. So there's days where there is flexibility to make some of those decisions and adapt to the kids that you have in your classroom and not feel like I got to keep going so I stay on pace. And then we talked about those Eureka assessments, the min and end module on the exit slips. Switching to reading. So again, fall and spring performance. Green is how our students performed in the fall. And then blue in the spring. Again, students who are on level and higher. Again, if you take that and compare it to the national comparison, you can see again, in some areas we've outperformed the national comparison, in other areas, at our younger grades, not so much. But again, if you take into considerations like we talked about, the data source being on a piece of technology, the multiple choice, the limited DOK, and I think this is one of the things you heard from the teachers is iReady doesn't have a strong connection to what we do in the classroom and our curriculum. For our literacy continuum, our reading and writing units, we adopted Lucy Calkins this year in writing. We have a high-frequency word list that's from Fontes of Pinnell that we utilize and report out on the report cards. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But again, for your information, Mr. Kaufman, here's the same thing in reading. So when you asked about other reading assessments, we're using the benchmark assessment system. All students in K-5, this is the second year we've done that, where teachers sit and hear students read and do a reading conference. So it's only year 2, the data is probably a little raw, and it's not exactly data you would use to measure student growth. It is a data point for informing instruction and doing reading instruction. This is a new piece we have this year, K1, and you heard the teachers talking about, do they know the alphabet? Do they know uppercase and lowercase letters? Do they know the sounds they make? Do they have phonemic awareness? This is the first year. But we are talking with our reading specialists around what's a common way we can bring that data together and report out on the school level so the district is informed. We're continuing with PD around using the Reading Writing Workshop, guided reading. Running records is an ongoing piece for reading growth. We talked about our high-frequency word lists. And then this is the new piece this year. We had our Writing Institute over the summer. We had over 100 teachers trained from Teachers College. And we're proceeding with the pacing guide and pre and post on-demand writing assessments beginning in kindergarten and going all the way to 5th grade. This is a review of our SBAC data. Again, performance from the SBAC comes in 4 levels: exceeds, meets, nearly meets grade level performance, and does not meet. So starting in math, you can see the performance of about over 13,000 students in grades 3 through 8 and how they performed at the 4 levels, the highest level being to the left and the lower level being to the right. If you take that into consideration and look at it to our district results, this gives you a window into the number of students tested at level 3, so meets and exceeds for last year. So you can see about half of our students in grade 3 and then all the way down through grade 8. If you were to look at these same results and break them down by those 4 scoring categories, it would look something like this. So the 52% of kids that performed at or above proficiency are over here. So we'd like to see these numbers out of the white and higher over in the blue and moving to the right. So you can see where they are over the 2016-17 school year. If you look at math over the course of 3 years, our scores have stayed kind of level within like 3 to 5% going across. There hasn't been a huge peak or shift. We don't want to see, obviously, these numbers going up. I think I heard from the board earlier that wanting the numbers going higher, but they're kind of staying fairly level. And we have to talk about the changes that are coming to this assessment as well, which I'm going to speak about in a little bit. Switching over to language arts, same thing. You got 13,000 kids. You can see how they performed in those 4 levels again, from exceeds all the way to not just yet. So going from the state down to the district level. Sorry.
Sorry, how do we have 13,000 kids in each grade?
That's the state.
State.
Okay, sorry.
That would be a big budget
That
problem.
would be.
So state level, going to the district level, this is the number or percentage of kids that tested at or above. So again, you can see the about high 40s to 50% of our students performing on the SBAC at level 3 and higher. Again, if you were to break that down by those 4 proficiency levels, we'd want to see higher numbers over here in blue. And you can see how they've broken down. So they're fairly even across those 4. So if you continue that analysis going over the last 3 years, we want to see numbers going higher to the left here. And we're still kind of performing at the same approximate level for the last 3 years. I'm going to speak about that in a minute. One of the challenges with SBAC, which we're hoping to change, we get performance information. So this is average scale score by level 3 and above for 3rd grade. We don't get a lot of released items or information back from SBAC. We only get 2 things, claims and targets. So claims show us within these categories, kind of like you were asking about for iReady, Mr. Kaufman. Here it will show us how our kids perform in those categories. This is the state and this is the district. So if our kids aren't performing well in reasoning, it would show up here. Not terribly helpful information, but it gives you an idea of some student performance. One of the more helpful ones is for the targets. So this is 3rd grade summative data for Nashua. These symbols here would show us equals means we're on grade level, plus would mean our kids are performing above. These minus ones would be something to look at as to why can't our students recognize parameters and attributes of plane figures, distinguish between linear and area measurements. So that would be another something to consider, bring to the steering committee and look through our curriculum. If we switch away from reading and math and look at NECAP, again, NECAP is 3 types of questions: multiple choice, constructive response, and inquiry, in 3 grades over 3 domains of science. The advantage here is we get years of released items that we use and embed in our curriculum, and we use those as practice items for kids. We don't have that advantage with SBAC because we don't get to see the level of detail. But with that, you can see this is last year's 16-17 district summary of how our kids performed. Overall, only 1% in level 4, 30% in level 3, 41% in level 2, and 27% in level 1. I'm just going to look a little more closely from the district level, going by grade. So grade 4, fairly consistent compared to the state. We have a higher number of, like 3% higher than the state in performing at level 4, but fairly the same in level 2 and level 1. If you take a look at grade 4 over the last 3 years, same sort of trend, fairly consistent over the last 3 years, staying in single digits in level 4, double-digit percentage, like mid-40s and 30s. So most of our students are performing right in here between 2 and 3 and 4th grade over the last 3 years. 8th grade, we have less than 1% of students performing at the highest level. Mid-20% in level 3, and you could read the other part in level 2 and 1. If you take that again over the last 3 years, interestingly enough, we only have 1% here, but more of our kids are scoring over in this section. You know, here's half of our 46% and 33%. And lastly, grade 11 to the state, pretty similar performance at level 4, slightly lower in level 3, higher in level 2, and higher in level 1. So over the last 3 years, again, now our scores in grade 11 are over here. We'd obviously want to see these moving to the left and being in the higher levels in levels 3 and 4. So that's where we are. Granted, I've just taken on this project recently, so I went through the data and I have some recommendations on where to go forward. So some of the things we want to do with science, there is a shift at the state level. So NACAP is no longer, we're moving to a New Hampshire student assessment system. So we wanted to bring this information and review it with the science contact team and the steering committee. We're going to continue revising our curriculum. We have training coming up. We're going to go to the state training in November, and we've invited the 2 state level people from the Assessment and Accountability Office to come to Nashua and train all our administrators to give an overview of what this assessment is going to look like. Some of the changes that are coming to the assessment, it's going to stay fairly similar in being adaptive, standards-based, and aligned to the local state curriculum. One of the nicer things is we can generate individual score reports within 10 to 15 days after the student completes it. Our targets and claims will be similar and will be correlated to previous statewide assessments. So we'll have in ELA and math the ability to kind of bring how we've done the last 3 years into how things are going to perform the next few years, but although next year would obviously be a baseline year. So some of the things that we're doing at our district level with this change, we talked about data. We have to find some way of bringing the reading information and these K1 results to the curriculum specialists, and we have to review and revise this new implementation of the units of study for writing. The math is in our 2nd year in K5, so there is a need to revisit the scope and sequence. What is the OGAP results telling us? The training that we've done with teachers, and we really need to meet with the curriculum specialists. In science, the science assessment is moving from grade 4 to grade 5. That one's not a computer adaptive test, and the questions won't adapt based on the student response, so it'll just pretty much be a generic test that they all take. These won't align with the former NECAP scores. And then this year, I'm sorry, that popped up, will be a baseline for scoring for that new assessment as well. So I think what we're proposing is moving from a model of collecting all the data and having some data teams. And talking with the curriculum specialists, the assistant principals, it's been a number of years since they all met as a group and had the opportunity to review data. So we'd like to have a data team that includes principals, teachers, administrators, anybody from this committee, our data specialists and curriculum coordinators, and use those as a means to bring to the board And those should kind of shape our priorities in our budget. And you talked about the need, if something's not working in kindergarten, then we want to be able to address it. So that's what we're hoping to do, and have data teams and a K-12 data team. So in summary, we're going to continue with our curriculum initiatives and refinement. We have a PD schedule outlined for the year for all levels, K-12. We have some school goals, for example, at the elementary level, a goal around literacy, a goal around math, a goal around full-day kindergarten, and then a school choice goal for specific like school culture or school behavior. We're looking to reform and get steering committees up and running and meeting regularly, and form some data teams and have them meet periodically and have this cycle of improvement, continuous improvement. Because like you're saying, we've changed some things, we've done some things differently, but where's the impact in some of those scores? So is there a misalignment piece, or what does those assessments tell us? I think there's a need to, in working with Ms. Fitzpatrick, looking around curriculum alignment, both vertically and horizontally, K-12. Are we covering all the standards? Are we covering them well? What are the assessments telling us? Where are the gaps? What are we missing? Coming back to standards-based grading and expanding that K-12 and revisiting it. That's kind of been a challenge the last few years with different administrations and coming and going. We put it in place 2 years ago, and it hasn't been revisited. So this year we're coming back to it and refining it. And then basically this is a learning year. We do need to learn and adapt to the new assessment system and what it brings. So I think we've put forth a good effort of going out there and getting the information we need and inviting the experts to come here and present to us. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we go to a vote to see if we stay or not, I've got 2 questions for administration. The first one is actually for you, Dr. McKinney. Since you are we need you to answer questions probably. Are you able to stay for, say, until 8 o'clock if the vote goes that way? Okay, the second question is for administration in general. Does administration seek approval of a committee motion at this point? This is a quorum question, so if you don't think
the purpose of today was tonight.
just information.
Yes.
That's what I thought.
And I think that's returning to a past practice that was here a few years ago.
Okay, so very good. All right, so now let me ask the members of the committee. So the voting members would be myself, Mr. Kaufman, and Ms. Twyver. Mrs. Hornsey, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I just have a question. Is this the same, this presentation, is it the same materials that we were given in our packet? Because I'm not seeing it lined up, but I didn't even see science in my packet material.
So, no, I don't believe, at least electronically, I did not receive this particular presentation or the previous one. And those 2 presentations will be sent to us in PDF form later. So
Okay, it's hard to follow without having
I
it
understand.
in front of you.
I do understand.
Can you just
That's all.
send it to the entire board?
Yep.
Dr. Miritaki?
Yes.
Because we have not seen this material before, I would not be willing to continue tonight. I would like to have some time to review his presentation, and maybe we can continue that in the November meeting,
Okay.
and that's how I'm going to vote.
Okay. So that's 1 vote against.
Yep.
And Mr. Kaufman?
I happen to agree with Ms. Van Twyver. I think it was, it's unfortunate that we didn't get the materials before the meeting as
Right.
policy requires, because we cannot make informed decisions. We send out one set of data, which we didn't even review tonight.
Okay.
That's in the packet. So I would agree with Ms. Van Twyver.
Then the committee is unanimous in deferring questions until the next meeting. So we'll add that to the list of agenda topics. And if I may ask the administration, in future meetings of this committee, if information to be presented at the committee could be at least electronically sent to us, and preferably included also in the hard copy board packets, that would be useful.
One of the things that the request was just for the data. And so we sent the data, but we just didn't want to send the data, so we wanted to put the data into a context.
Right.
So rather than just people picking at the data, again, the presentation was kind of like, just maybe it might be helpful to just kind of outline the data and to move some things around, so we'll certainly do that the next time.
Thank you very much. Okay, so,
For the record, plenty of questions to ask
right.
Yeah.
And,
that I'd be willing to ask tonight, but like,
Okay.
yeah.
so.
Well, you're a fast
so-
thinker, I'm not that fast.
So there are certainly lots of questions that I've got, but I think more questions came forward as I saw both this presentation and the previous one. So I think I certainly agree with my other two committee members. We'll defer the questions.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
So, yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. We are adjourned at 7:30.